Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We're here today with our Mindset and Motivation Monday. My favorite way to start the week with you is to provide you with a little bit about what has inspired me. Through my research and my education in the field of health and functional medicine and integrative health, what I like to do is really bring together the understanding that how our mind perceives our happiness often allows us to move forward towards the life that we want to live. And this absolutely does affect our overall health and well-being. So what I wanted to share with you today is this really interesting research in the field of what's called hedonic adaptation. And hedonic adaptation is really what they call a happiness set point. We shared this information back, let's say a couple hundred episodes ago, in a little bit different of a way. Today, what I want to share with you is the research as to why we don't always seem that we're able to hold on to the happiness that we've achieved in certain goals that we've made happen in our life. So we all know that we might have gotten the promotion that we want. We might have had our first, second, third, fourth, whatever it might be, child. We're in a relationship that we really enjoy, and things are great, and we're feeling that happiness, and then it seems to fade after a little bit of time. Well, if you've ever experienced that, and you kind of went back to that normal baseline level of happiness, that is exactly what the field of hedonic adaptation is called. And really interesting, I would say, name for it is the hedonic treadmill. So when you look at the hedonic treadmill, what you're talking about is, I'm going to actually give you the quote right now, is developed and revised further, given that hedonic adaptation generally demonstrates that a person's long-term happiness is not significantly affected by otherwise impacting events. Positive psychology has concerned itself with the discovery of things that can lead to lasting changes in happiness levels. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is basically way back in 1971, there's a term by Brickman and Campbell called hedonic treadmill. And that is us going from one goal to the next. And after achieving something that we always set our minds to, we thought it would bring us this level of happiness. It does for a very finite period of time. And then we kind of sink back down to our baseline level of happiness. But there's an amazing part to this. And that is in the field of positive psychology, we now know there is a way that we are able to bring up our baseline level of happiness. So you might say that with every great achievement and that feeling of essentially perspective and gratitude that we have with achieving that thing, we will be able to increase our level of baseline happiness. And that is really what I'm trying to teach people. Because we know through neuroscience that we essentially start with, let's say, the pot of 100% of happiness, right? So all the happiness in the world is that it was what you could achieve. Well, if we look at that and we'll say that maybe there's some rare person out there who is just infinitely happy, right? Let's say that person. Let's call them, let's say, the Dalai Lama. Okay. Now, there are going to be levels to this for each individual. You probably know in your own family, some people are naturally maybe happier and more joyous than others. And there could be reasons for that. I want to go through it now. About 50% of that we find in medical literature and psychology. 50% of that is genetic. So meaning like 50% out of your whole happiness is genetic. Now, again, no one's going to be zero on that spectrum, and it's going to be difficult to get all 50%, right, to max out that part of it if we're kind of like building your avatar, okay? But let's say that your maximum on your 50% is like, oh, well, you get, let's say, 75% of that, 80% of that, 90% of that, somewhere in there, okay? Or maybe it's just 50% of that 50%, okay? So, all right, you're starting with maybe a little less or a little bit more happiness. However, this is the great thing about it. You have another 50% that can be worked on. So that extra 50% comes from our thoughts, our actions, and how we are living our life. And that's 40% of that. The last 10% is events, right? So we know that our events in our life, getting that promotion, right? Getting into that new relationship, whatever it might be, you're going to get that burst. And that's going to be an excess of extra happiness. You're going to feel on top of the world. And that's fantastic, right? For a period of time. But there's also going to be events in your life, unfortunately, that might be a little bit more tragic. A death of a loved one is a good example of that. And you're going to feel much, much lower for a certain period of time, a finite period of time, most likely. And then you'll be back to your baseline level of happiness. Well, that is where we typically stand, right? So 50% is genetic and 50% is us. It's our thoughts, our actions, how we lead and live our life. And 10% of that other 50%, as we talked about, are those events. So there'll be highs and there'll be lows. Now, there's an ancient Vedic saying, many other forms as well in Buddhism, that's like never get too high and never get too low, right? It's like don't go for those extremes because we know that those aren't going to last. We can't stay in that. But are we able to raise that baseline? And there's some great research. This is in the research of positive psychology. I want to share it with you because I thought this was really important, right? So this is super important. Can our long-term average level of happiness change? That was the question. And they set out to do the research, meaning, can we take all of our happiness and can we raise it just a little bit higher, a couple deviations higher? Okay, to answer this question, Fujita and Diner designed a longitudinal study that examined changes in the baseline level of well-being over a period of 17 years in a large sample of Germans. This is in 2005. The researchers found that even though there was a significant stability in happiness assessments, 24% of participants still experienced a significant change to their happiness level, and 9% of participants changed by 2 standard deviations or more. It seems that long-lasting change is possible. So, what did I take from this study after reading it over? Well, about a third of the people or so, at least a quarter, experienced significant changes in happiness. And I believe that it is not the norm to increase your overall level of happiness. I believe the norm is to stay right where you are, right? I do believe that. And I've talked about this on other shows and Motivation Mindset Mondays as well. Because to get an extraordinary level of happiness, which means something outside of the ordinary, even for yourself, you need to do extraordinary things. But extraordinary things are really just extraordinary things, things that ordinarily wouldn't be done. And that is to actually work on your happiness. How many people do you know actually work on their happiness? To me, it's not too many. Like I don't know too many people that say every day when I wake up, I'm going to actively work on my happiness. And that is why I believe our genetics and our current life conditions keep us at a pretty set point, right? It's like, well, we're not really unhappy, but we're not really happy either, right? Like it's not a good place to be. It's just not what I want for you, not what I want for your family, your loved ones. So here's what we need to think about. This is next week's Mindset and Motivation Monday. Today's episode 1767. What I want to do next week is actually give you a proven set of tools, 6 steps that you can do to absolutely increase your happiness. This is taken directly out of positive psychology research. But today, I want to give you a few things that I've seen work in my practice time and time again, and also for myself. Because I will tell you that into my early 20s, so childhood to early 20s, I would say. And I don't know. I think that I was like overall fairly happy, like young child kid. And then maybe not so much for a period of like 20 years or so. I just think that things were not, I didn't understand the world. I had a very difficult time understanding my place in the world, what I was doing, what was going on. I was sick for a full decade of that. I was just not in a good place, And so for me, I had my genetic happiness, right? But it was much lower after that, right? It was much lower because how we experience and we perceive events, our life events, indirectly contributes to our happiness levels. Or you could say directly does, right? But you might not consciously be aware of it. So I was upset at not being able to get well, not being able to figure out what was wrong with me. Everyone else was having the time of their life, and my senior year of high school and all through college and all those different things. And for me, it just wasn't happening. Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed college. I enjoyed my teens and 20s. It's not about that, but my level of happiness, not where it is today. Like nowhere close. So back then I wasn't like, well, I was unhappy. I wasn't saying that necessarily, but I certainly wasn't saying I was happy either. Now I can say I am happy, and I can juxtapose that from before. Sometimes you never really know. Like people don't know what true wellness is. I say that all the time. Like people don't know what it feels like to be really well and healthy if you're not waking up with abundant energy, a clear mind, a lot of ambition, a lot of drive. If you don't feel those things, it's hard to know what it even feels like. So you need to do the things that would get you there. And then you can look back and you can say, oh, now I get it. This is what health and happiness is really all about. So now I can look back, because again, I'm healthier today than I was even when I wasn't sick before 17 years old, right? Before 17, I was still getting ear, nose, and throat infections. I was still dealing with allergies. I was still dealing with headaches every afternoon. I had no idea what was going on with my body. Today, none of those things are happening. I have more energy today than I did as a kid. Like, again, it's not supposed to be that way unless you work on it. And I know, listening to this podcast, I know that you are. So here's what I think. This is what I think. One, you don't have to be, just like any genetics, you don't have to be locked into that. There's so much study in the world of epigenetics. We know that they can change. So you might look at the study, though, in 2005, and you say, well, why did only a quarter or a third of the people get a significant difference? And that's because most people don't work on it. They don't actively work on it. There's no way I would be where I am today without finding out that this even existed around the age of like 24, 25. I started to read books on self-improvement, on psychology, not just on my health. I got away from my physical health for a while because it just wasn't working. And I said, well, let me try to do better in other areas of my life: education, knowledge, self-improvement, etc. And I started to look at those things, and I realized was that my subconscious mind, the thoughts that were basically below the conscious, were dictating a lot of my actions I was taking. I wasn't going for certain things in life because I didn't believe I could achieve them. I wasn't developing the type of relationships that I wanted because I didn't think that they were for me. So I had these pre-existing thoughts that simply weren't true in reality, but I was making them true by believing them and reinforcing them every day with my thoughts, feelings, and then actions. Remember, if you have certain subconscious thoughts, like you're not good enough, you can never lose the weight, you can never get healthy, nobody in your family has ever done it, why would you be any different? If you have any of these thoughts, right, these subconscious thoughts, they're going to lead to feelings. What are those feelings going to be? Certainly not going to be positive, right? Certainly not going to be giving you the energy in your life or ambition to then take the actions to even change your life situation, which would then change the thoughts you're having. So for me, if I kept on believing I would never get well, and believe me, I had every reason to believe I would not get well. No doctors could figure it out. I'd been sick for years. Grandparents had autoimmune issues. Parents had autoimmune issues. Why should I be any different? I had no business believing I could be different. There's no doubt about that. No business believing it. But I started to read these books, and these books said things could be different. Someone like you has overcome this, and why not you? You just don't have the answer yet. And your psychology is affecting your physiology, which is the truth, right? Having anxious thoughts, having angry thoughts, being upset, being worried, being overwhelmed causes certain hormones in our body to become higher or lower. Higher levels of stress hormones, lower levels of positive hormones like testosterone, progesterone, and other hormones inside of our body, DHEA. So we know that it has a direct effect on our body. So I said, well, I don't have a lot to lose, even though it seems ridiculous. I don't have a lot to lose by starting to think a little bit more positively, by starting to create a different vision for myself of what I could be. I said, listen, I'm a daydreamer anyways. Why don't I just daydream myself into being in a better, healthier body, a better career than I had right now, right? Like all of these different things. So what I did was I set my mind to that. And did it happen overnight? No, especially when I would relapse and get even more sick. It was difficult to envision a healthier, happier life. But I did it anyway. And part of that was just being stubborn enough to say, I'm going to push through the situation I'm in right now because I know that my genetics are not my destiny. That if other people have overcome this, I can too. That the only reason I will fail is if I quit. And I started putting these things into my mind. And I started envisioning a life a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, of what would happen if I were to simply take the steps, put in the work, read the books, get the education, meet with the doctors, meet with the coaches, and begin to move forward and learn from what didn't work and just say, I'm not going to repeat that again. But also take what does work and try to say, can I do a little bit more of this? Or why did it work? So I started to look at life as more of a journey. And now, what did that do? Well, actually, it began to raise my hedonic adaptation, right? What happened was this. So before, sure, I would get high highs and low lows. There's no doubt about it. But I would say, okay, yeah, this is working. This is working. But I would say, well, things have worked before. And I kind of relapsed a little bit. So I wouldn't get down on myself, but I would say, we're on to something here, okay? And I would say this, even if I relapse, I'm on to something. I know that I'm moving in the right direction. That to me was a game changer. I also said to myself, hey, because I was a complete insomniac, and I just broke down one night when it was just another sleepless night. I would never share this information with anybody. My family never knew it, anybody. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. I knew I had to be up in a couple hours. I knew there was no way I was going to fall asleep. There was just no way. So I said to myself, you know what? Tonight's the last night of me feeling sorry for myself. The last night. Whether I get any sleep or not does not matter. It doesn't matter. I'm moving forward in my life in a positive direction, whether I don't get any sleep or not. And it was hard, right? Because I would be groggy, I would be tired, and it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. And I would just say, you're just going to learn and you're going to move forward. You're going to have more better days than not. And you're going to start to move in this direction. And over time, I actually did start to get well. And I got well mainly because I had this attitude that I wasn't going to give up. Sure, I needed to figure out my gut issues that I had, my adrenal issues that I had, immune issues that I had. I needed to figure those things out, but I was able to figure them out because I wasn't willing to give up. And also because I didn't think that there was a silver bullet. I had tried so many things. I just said, I'm going to learn and I'm going to grow. I'm going to mess up, I'm going to fail, and I'm going to learn what not to do, and I'm going to grow from that. So my baseline was actually now a little bit higher because I wasn't dealing with these lows. I just wasn't like, if I would get sick, I'd say, well, you've been here before. You've already been sick. Don't worry about it. You're going to get well again. You get well every time. Sometimes it takes a week. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 weeks. But you're going to get well again, right? You didn't sleep tonight. It's okay. Tomorrow night you're going to sleep. And I would just keep telling myself that and moving forward. And so for me, I was just trying to inspire myself to take the next step. And you know what? It doesn't work in the beginning. And then it does. It takes at least 66 days, what they found, 21 days to set that habit in, about 66 days on average to make the change, 90 days being the upper limit. So you're going to get there in 12 weeks. We always tell people 12 weeks, give it 12 weeks. You can get there in 12 weeks because it's the truth. And you move forward. Now, are you perfect in 12 weeks? No. But you get it now. You understand what needs to be done. You're on the journey. So how I looked at it is I started to get better, significantly better. And what I attribute that to is realizing that I've set a lot of goals for myself in my life. And I want you to set goals. Over the next couple of weeks, as we're moving into the new year, I'm going to go back to my goal setting formulas and I'm going to give you all of them. Ones that have worked for me and they've worked for my private clients as well. Okay, anybody that I've shared them with. But what I want to share with you today is this. You're going to have a lot of goals in your life, okay? There's no doubt about it. You can set big goals. You can set small goals. You might be a person that's just good right now. Totally fine with me. Again, I'm here to support you in however you want it. But I want you to look at it like this. I have short-term goals. I have long-term goals. I have goals from 5 years from now. I have goals 10 years from now. But I don't get anxious about those in the future. What I'm trying to do today is understand that even when I achieve those goals in a few months from now or a few years from now, I'm going to take a moment to appreciate it. I'm going to take a moment to be grateful. But also, I'm going to understand is that there is never one achievement that is going to bring me this level of happiness that I was seeking. It's not going to happen. Because I understand that it is the actual journey through life and how we view life's events, our goals, and our setbacks that really leads to our happiness. And nobody wants to share this with you. They just don't. They always want to think that there's this silver bullet. But it is the journey. I know you've heard the journey before, but the journey is what it's all about. Now, is the journey about growth? Absolutely. It is. Whether you're searching for enlightenment or you're trying to choose and create the best relationships in your life. If you're trying to develop the best career and move forward in your career, your own education, your own health. All of those are great goals. And I'm not saying not to seek those. You should. I've actually found growth to be one of the best processes in order to raise your baseline level of happiness, is because you understand that you haven't arrived and you will never arrive. That's the amazing thing. I hope that you will continue to grow your entire life. It's one of the secrets to longevity, is people need something to look forward to. Now, maybe it's simply being in a different area instead of your life and looking forward to being able to nurture and be around more with your grandkids, right? That's one great way to look at it. But it can also be in terms of your own relationships, your volunteering, like all the different things that you are achieving and accumulating wisdom in. Wouldn't it be amazing to now begin to teach and share that with others, whether it's your own family, your community, or anywhere online? So I want to leave you with one thing before we move into next week's show, which is going to be the 6 proven principles in positive psychology to raise that baseline, is that we need to look at every day, not as a high and a low. And even when we get to our goals, don't believe that that goal is going to bring you happiness. Your happiness has to start today. And it starts today by working on at least that 50% that we know can change within our life of our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, how we experience life. If you begin to look at life differently, you'll already start to enjoy some of that happiness that you want out there in the future. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. I appreciate you. And as always, if this show was helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone else you believe it could serve.